So first of all, just let me know like my voice is audible or not. Just drop some comments on the chats so that I can know. Okay, cool. Okay. So yeah, I am Ayan Gupta and I am from Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, and I am one of the co-organized. Sorry, I am one of the organizers of Holiday X. And if you don't know about Holiday X, then Holiday X is a one online hackathon. It's a 24-hour online hackathon which is going to take place on 29th of February. And if you haven't registered yet, then we will share you the link in the description. Yeah, you will find the link in the description also, and we will share the link on the chats also. So yeah, we all know why we all are here today because our today we have a topic, our session on Flutter, getting started with Flutter, and we have a speaker with us, Aditya Thakur. So I'm going to invite him. So and I hope you all are excited about this session. So I'm going to invite Aditya. Hey, hello Aditya.
Hey, thank you, Ayan. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, yeah,
Really excited to be here today and joining Holiday Acts on this session on Flutter.
yeah. So yeah, I think now the stage is yours. You can start.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I'll start by sharing my screen and then we'll go
yeah,
forward
sure.
with that. So I hope my screen is visible. I'll just make it full screen. So, welcome
Yeah,
to this session on Flutter development. Today we'll start with Flutter. We'll talk about getting started with it. How can you build applications? To just begin with it, Flutter is a framework that lets you build applications, and it lets you do it for a wide variety of like operating systems. You can build for Android, for iOS, on and all these different devices. So we'll talk about what Flutter is. How can you start with it? How can you build your applications? I'll talk a bit about my journey also, but more importantly, I'll help you get started building your own applications. And if in this hackathon you want to build something with Flutter, this would be more of like an introductory session that takes you through everything that you can do and go beyond as a developer. Talking a little bit about me, like why should I be talking about Flutter and who am I to deliver this session. I'm Aditya Thakur. I'm a developer advocate at 100ms, currently working with them. With Flutter, I have had like 2 years of experience right now. I've been an open source contributor to Flutter plus plugins, the Flutter Fire official repositories. I am a creator. I create videos. I have a YouTube channel with like 6,000 subscribers, and I have been a speaker at some of the community events like the Flutter Vikings, which is one of the largest Nordic conference, the Global Summit, and events here in India. A number of events here in India. I also have a community of my own, which is around 900 plus developers. We are mostly Flutter developers, and we try to like help each other uh, to work with this, maybe find opportunities in technology. So that is about me. Before we start, one of the things that I like everyone to imagine in this session or generally when starting out with app development is to look around and try to identify what is one particular device that you more importantly work on. For me, it's my mobile device. It's easier these days to do something on mobile than it was a few years back. Like, let us say you're trying to go to a place, maybe you're trying to book some tickets, maybe some airline tickets, and you're trying to do this. I remember when I was in seventh standard, it would be a difficult procedure, as in, like, we were planning this holiday and I had to go over, open a laptop, maybe try to book it there. Uh, right now, you can do this all on a mobile phone. So you can just open one of the applications, go over to it, try to book tickets, and even like check in, check out the different hotels that are around that place and do everything on mobile. Like, you can shop for stuff, you can add these items to cart, order them online, order food, maybe do transactions and all that on just your mobile device, which sort of like tells you like a lot of time that you spent is generally on your mobile phones. You've been doing like social media and stuff. You might watch a lot of videos, play games on a mobile device, and very little on your browsers. A lot of the things that you do on mobile phone are done in mobile applications, which means that there is a need for these mobile developers, and it's somewhat growing. The idea is, like, if you're trying to build something, maybe as a student entrepreneur, or maybe as maybe generally in technology, I would say, like, you might want to target mobile devices. But the problem is, there are different wide varieties of operating systems that a mobile device can come in. The two major ones are definitely Android and iOS. So if you're building for mobile phones, you have to check out the operating system that you're particularly building on. There is Android. There are mobile phones that come with Android. There are Apple devices that come with iOS. Generally, whenever people start, what the common procedure is, like, since I have had a Android mobile device for a long time, the first thing that I did when I was starting out with mobile development was I got Android Studio, which is like a very not a very simple IDE, but it makes it somewhat easier to build applications. So what you have to do is, you can, drag and drop certain elements on screen and try to add functionality to them. Generally, if you are building for Android devices, you can do it either in Java or the Kotlin programming language. And after you are done building your application, you can publish it to Play Store. So you'll take your application that you build, export it, and then you can publish it to Play Store. The problem is, if you build an Android application, it would run only on Android devices. So let us say you build something, you try to build a mobile application because that is the platform that you want to target. A lot of people use mobile phones, and you want to build a mobile application. You do it for Android. The problem is, it would only run on Android devices. And what about your friends on iOS? Like, they would want to use your application. Now you can't send them a Play Store link and have them download the application. You would have to build your application again somewhat from scratch. For iOS devices, for that, the languages that we use are normally um, Swift. And there are things that you have to do to make it compatible for an iOS device. And it's a whole lot of like stuff that you have to do. And as a single developer possibly working on it, it would be a lot of things that you have to learn. Generally, it would be a lot of coding to learn Swift and build an iOS app. For startups too, it's a big problem, because when they are starting out, they can't hire that many developers. So if they hire some Android developers, they would also need an iOS team, and it's just a lot of expenditure to ship just one application to these devices. Possibly you might also want to build like a web application. Like, this is the one we built for one of our internal applications, where we wanted to get like user emails before we release the application. So it was like a simple, very simple web app. But with Flutter, like, it helps you solve these problems, right? So if you're trying to build an application, possibly a mobile application for Android and iOS, or for other such devices, you can do this using Flutter. It's at heart a cross platform framework, which means, like, you can build applications for six different operating systems. Right now in stable, you can build for Windows, for the web, for iOS, and for Android. In beta, you can also build for Mac OS and Linux. So these are all the operating system it lets you target. What it is, you write code in Dart programming language, and you can take this code and run the application on all these different devices. I'll show you how we do that. Like, we'll test it out right now. We'll see how to install Flutter framework, and we'll also take up your questions regarding to it. But generally speaking, if you're trying to participate in a hackathon, I would say Flutter could give you an advantage in terms of the people you can reach with your product. So the first hackathon that I participated in, we were trying to build an application that was somewhat a mental health application that would help people both, gauge how they are feeling in that moment, and also how would they, respond to it, provide some tips on that. The devices that we want to target were generally in a wide variety of categories. Like, people could be feeling anyway, and they want to access it on like a particular device. So we wanted to build a Windows application. We wanted to have like a web application for ease of accessibility. We also wanted to target iOS and Android. So that is where like Flutter was like the quite the right choice, because it would help us get one app on all these different devices and accessible to a number of people in that sense. So that is where Flutter comes in. But what I'll do quickly is I'll skip over this presentation for now and just go over to how can you get Flutter, or how can you get started with it. So Flutter has its official website, which is flutter.dev. If you do not find it, you can just search for Flutter on Google, and this should be the first website that comes up. So this is the official website of Flutter. It lets it, the first, I think the major pitch they have is build apps for any screen. uh, there are it lets you transform this app development process. You can build and deploy beautiful applications to mobile, web, desktop, and even embedded devices from just a single code base. There are a lot of features that they have mentioned. It's very fast. When you're writing code, you can quickly see the changes in on screen. It's very productive. There are, I think, hot reload and update code and see changes again lets you do a lot of things. And it's a lot flexible with the UI. It can let you control every pixel on screen, build beautiful stuff with it. Makes it really easy in that sense. You can also reach users, which was also one of our pitches. Like you can see, like here is an example. There are two different mobile devices, a wider screen and a laptop, possibly web, a desktop application, and lets you do that with just one single code base. So right now, Flutter is being used by a number of big companies, because one of the common questions that I get is, what are the companies that use Flutter, or what are some of these companies that have been using it? Google Pay uses Flutter. So if you have recently made a payment using Google Pay, you have used a Flutter app. There are other applications here in India that use Flutter. So there is, if you are into like trading and intraday trading, or possibly trading in general, you might have used Zerodha's Kite application that is also built with Flutter. There are other applications like there's Front Row if you are into learning from interactive courses. There's Yellow Class, which is built with Flutter, Kuhu, Front Row, XYZ, and all these different applications use Flutter internally, and they also hire Flutter developers. There is also Zest Money that uses Flutter, and so on. There are also companies outside India that use Flutter, and some of them have been mentioned here. Like there's the Philips Hue app, there's the BMW app, Alibaba, that use Flutter, and it's supported by Google. More importantly, it's open to everyone. You can use it for free. It's a open source framework. You can also contribute code. So to get started, like you have this get started button on the Flutter website, and you can go over and install Flutter for your system. If you're on Windows, you can just go over and install the Windows version. But if you're on Mac OS, you can choose accordingly. The Windows installation is quite simple. I'm right now on a Windows device, so you can check for your operating system, download the Flutter SDK. Just download the zip file, extract it somewhere, and you can update your path, because that's the normal procedure that we do with Flutter or with any installation as such. Like you have to add path to your add the edit the environment variables, and you'll get access to Flutter in the command prompt, and you can run Flutter Doctor. I would recommend watching a dedicated video, like if you can, after this session, maybe go over to YouTube, watch a video on how to install Flutter, and that would cover most of the steps. You might also need Android Studio. You can use either Android Studio as your IDE, like you can use Android Studio to write code in, or you can use Visual Studio Code also. If you're coming from a web development background, you can always use VS Code to write code in. On Mac OS, the setup is a bit different, and you can check the steps here. Like it's quite detailed. Uh, you have to unzip, and you can add like Flutter tool to your path. This one is like temporary. To permanently add your path, you can follow these steps. Uh, I would recommend, like after this session, possibly watch a video. But once you have Flutter installed on your system, what you would get is, like, let's just go over to command prompt. You can run a command called flutter dash dash version to see if like Flutter is installed successfully. This should take some time to run. While we wait for this to run, what I would recommend is like the documentation provided by the Flutter team. It's quite accessible on the website itself. Like if you'll go over to docs, you can find a lot of stuff here. But one important thing that a lot of people forget about is like if you're coming from a previous framework, like let us say you are already a Android developer or you have been working with Android, so there are also documentations available particularly for you to transition into Flutter, because as developers a lot of us tend to compare the new language that we are learning with the last one that we did. So you can check out Flutter for Android devs if you have previously worked as a Android developer, maybe as iOS, or if you have worked with React Native, there is a simple guide, Flutter for React Native devs. And in like it's a lot similar. Like it Flutter has widgets in it which make it very easy to work with. There are a lot of things that you can do. There are a lot of provided widgets that you can reuse to build applications. The documentation is also quite detailed with the sample and tutorials that they provide. Like they have a Flutter gallery. Cookbooks are available if you want to learn about certain things, as in animation, maybe design effects and forms. Let's wait for this Flutter version command to run. So after during this session, I'll also talk about the different opportunities that are there. Like right now, I was talking about the different companies that hire for Flutter developers. We would also want to look at um, some of the opportunities that you can get in Flutter. But this command is taking a lot of time, so I'll just wait for this. Okay, so a new Flutter version is available, but right now I am on Flutter 2.10, which was like a release I think a month back, 3 months ago. Okay, so this was a release a few months back. I still have to update my version, but once you have Flutter installed, you can follow some steps to add the path to your uh, you know system, and then after that you'll get access to like using it in command prompt, and you can run Flutter version to check uh, what version of Flutter you are currently on. You can check Flutter, you can run the Flutter doctor command to check the installation. And this should take some time. Like the first step to working with Flutter or for any framework that with any framework for that matter is to install it. But after that Flutter becomes a lot easier. This was also like the first framework that I have worked in at length, and I really loved it. So you can run the Flutter doctor command to check the installation, and this should like once it's all green, like you can start working on your projects of your own. So to get started with Flutter, you can run the Flutter. First we'll navigate to desktop. First we'll come to the desktop. I have used the change directory and went over to my desktop. Here I'll create a new Flutter project. To create a new Flutter project, you can type in Flutter, create, and the name of your project, like let us say first application. And this should create a new Flutter project. This should take some time. It's running the Flutter pubget, and you would see like once this is done, a first app project folder would appear here. It wrote 96 files for us, and you'll have a project created. Now we can open it in a editor of our choice. You can also use Android Studio. Like if you use Android Studio, you can create a project there. You don't have to use the terminal, but I generally uh, work with I generally work with Android Studio, although running that now would be very difficult because my PC is a bit slow. But you can run it on VS Code. It works fine as such. This is like the normal project structure. Whenever you create a new Flutter project, it comes with some code written for us, like the Flutter, like it said in the terminal, wrote 96 files. So there is some code already written, and you'll see like there are four directories made. One is the Android directory. This should have the Android side of things. There's an iOS directory which has the iOS code, and also a web. So there is a web directory and also a Windows one. Right now, in stable version, a Flutter app should run on four different devices, which is Android device, iOS, web, and Windows. You can also run on Mac OS and Linux device in beta, but right now it should normally run on like the web, Android, and iOS. So we can try running this Flutter project. I'll just go over to run and debug, and right now you will see like no device connected, but we can try running this on. So right now you'll see like when I hit run, it should show me like three different devices. One is the Windows, like it would run as a Windows application, or I can run it as a web application on Chrome. Or I can, create an Android emulator. Right now, I don't have one. I can connect my mobile device, run the application, run the Flutter app on that, or maybe run it on like an uh, iOS device if I have a MacBook. But right now, let's just launch it as a Windows application, maybe. So right now the Windows is connected and it should create a Windows application and launch it there. If we come back to our project structure, like we'll see there are a few important files that you only need to know about, so you don't have to worry about this Android and iOS folders or web folders. The one folder that we majorly work with when we are writing code is this lib folder, inside which we have a main.dart file. This is where most of our code will go. The language that we write code in when working with Flutter is a language called Dart. Dart programming language is a very powerful language. Dart is a very powerful language, and it is like internally used by the Google Ads team, so they really trust it. And also Dart is a lot similar to Java. Like if you have previously worked with that, Dart would be very familiar, and it would be very easy to get started with. For any resources on Dart, you can always go over to their official website, which is dart.dev. This website has like everything about Dart programming language, and there is also an online uh, try Dart or online compiler available where you can check out the different uh, where you can just test out code. So Dart lets you paint your UIs to life. It is a client optimized language for fast applications. The one page that I recommend watching or going over to is this documentation. You can go over to dart.dev slash guides where we have the documentation. But this language tool is the first important visit that I would say is. So when you're starting out with Flutter, more like having knowledge of Dart is very important. Somewhat like it helps you throughout your journey. But generally, all the courses that you would take up in Flutter cover Dart concept, so you don't have to worry as such that you have to do it externally. But if you know Dart, that would really help you throughout your journey. So you can just go over to a tour of Dart language if you are familiar with Java or any such programming language, and you can just look at a basic Dart program, how variables are defined. It would tell you like how variables are created in Dart, the different built-in types like numbers, strings, and all that stuff. You can check out how to create a function. It's very simple in Dart. And lastly, you can check out like operators, control flow statements, how that is done. If you're familiar with like Java, this should appear somewhat like similar syntax. You can type in a if statement, add to curly braces, type the function that you want to run, and like end it with a semicolon. And similarly, like that, you have error handling and classes and all that stuff. Basically take acquainted with some of the Dart concepts. It takes I think it would be around 1 or 2 hour read if you are like somewhat familiar with programming in general. And if you are completely new to it, I would recommend instead watching a tutorial that would also cover some of these concepts and also explain you about it. But let us come back to our project where it's running. So it's still building the Windows application. This should take some time to launch because my device is quite slow. Just close this. And until that builds up, we'll just come back to our Flutter website and go back. So here on the website again, it's mentioned right underneath here that Dart Flutter is powered by Dart. It is a language optimized for these fast apps, and you can visit the dart.dev. You can also check out their GitHub repository, like on. You can also check out the Flutter GitHub repository. So even like throughout your development, if you have any problems or if you have any issues, you can always create a new one here, or maybe just check out some of the previous issues. Normally it would be covered, and if you are a Flutter developer, you can always contribute to the Flutter repository or other repositories that are there under this organization. I'll recommend reading their contribution guidelines before you make any changes or before you try to do anything. uh, the Flutter repository, I feel, is quite helpful. Like if you will create an issue, they'll possibly someone from the team would take this up. There are a lot of issues open, and there are a lot of pull requests being made each day. But this is the GitHub repository or the GitHub page of Flutter, and you can check it out for any like changes and for anything that happens. So that is the language, and you have like a productive development. But why, before you go to that, let's just wait for this Windows application to build up. So by default, like the Flutter team has written some code for us. Like with any programming language, the first function to get control is this main function. So in Dart, how we create a main function is like we type in main, the two brackets, and create semicolon, and then we run our application. So the basic unit or everything in Flutter is a widget. When we are trying to build a Flutter application, what we majorly do is we create widgets on or top of the other. So you can think of these widgets as Lego blocks. And when you're trying to create an application, you would have a base widget on which you will put on other widgets, and this would create like the whole application for you. So I'll just go down in my presentation. Okay. So let us say we are trying to build a WhatsApp clone in Flutter. What would happen is like we'll create these widgets and we'll have one on top of the other. So let us say this is the layout you're trying to build in Flutter. What would happen is like each of these elements would become a widget. There would be a top app bar, and you would have like all these different elements as widgets, and then you can align using certain configuration. Like this would be a column alignment, and you can add other such stuff. So while this runs up, since we are already 30 minutes into the session, I'll just look at some of the questions you have. But we'll come back to it. Like everything is a widget in Flutter. We use the Dart programming language. The Flutter is a UI framework that lets you build beautiful applications. There was a bit of stuff that I missed right here, so I'll just come back to it. Okay, so we had already talked about like it lets you build for all these different platforms. It lets you build for Windows, web, iOS, and Android, and you can also build for Mac OS and Linux. But some of the features that Flutter has is like high velocity development. You have an expressive and flexible UI toolkit, and it lets you have that native iOS and Android app experience, even though it's a cross-platform framework. It's used by a lot of companies like Alibaba, Google AdWords, Birch Finance, Hamilton Musical, and here in India, it's used by Zerodha. So they had initially built a native application, but they soon realized that they wanted to cater to like iOS device owners as well. So they wanted to move cross platform. They moved cross platform with React Native, but the builds weren't as good, so they moved to Flutter. There is a very descriptive engineering blog by their team, and you can always Google for like Zerodha, Flutter, and I think that blog should show up. It is quite detailed, like it mentions their experience, why they chose Flutter, and it's like a point of debate within the community. Flutter versus React Native, a very common one. So here are some points that I have, and I think they are common across articles that I see. So in UI rendering, data processing, and synchronization, somewhere like Flutter wins, because React Native uses bridges to like interact with the native side of things, whereas Flutter combines it natively. So within the programming area, I feel like Flutter uses Dart, which is a very powerful language, but React Native uses JavaScript, which is like a quite well-known language and somewhere has like a larger community. A lot of people already had been working with it. So, and open source libraries, Flutter was a relatively newer framework for a long time, but I think the community has been contributing a lot. There are a lot of things that like people have taken up, and there are a lot of packages available right now that you can use within your Flutter application. uh, it's not again about building for all these different six platforms, but you have advantages when it comes to cross-platform frameworks, because again, like if you are writing some code, you can use the same business logic for different platforms, so you don't have to do that part again and again. So somewhere that helps you a lot. With particularly Android and iOS, you don't have to have like separate teams to build your applications. Like for startups, it could be a big issue when they're just starting out, or when they can't hire that many developers to both finish the two different applications. They can have just one team building for these two different devices. Also in India here particularly, a lot of startups like not having dedicated teams for iOS is because the percentage of iOS users is very less. Because in India, a lot of people have Android devices, and I think the percentage of uh, iOS device owners is very less, so they don't want to have like separate teams for all these different applications, right? So they just have one which is like cross-platform using Flutter. Flutter is a modern UI toolkit, and this is like the framework side of things. You have widgets, and like you have the engine, the Skia engine, and then you have the Flutter app client, which interacts with the iOS and Android host using the method channels. And you can go over this in more detail. Like there are videos on how it works under the hood, and like there are Flutter experts that have given talks on it, and you can just watch that. But everything for now that you need to know is Flutter is a widget. You can think of these widgets as Lego blocks. You put one on top of the other and you build a complete application. The language that we'll be writing code in is the Dart programming language. And I'll show you just now how it's done. So let's just take it to code. And before you go there, quickly check the comments. S- okay, let me just go back. Sorry. So I've been talking for like 30 minutes. I think it would be a good time to just check this. I hope there is not an audio issue right now, because that would be quite bad.
No, I
So,
think there is
uh,
not. So there is some
Cred
questions,
app.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just go over for a bit and then I'll just come back to it. I think somebody mentioned Cred app. Like I have heard recently, they have been working a lot. But Cred, I think they have had their applications, but they were both native applications. uh, I've heard some people talk about them using Flutter for some UI side of things, and I am really intrigued, but I haven't heard more on that. So Flutter or Kotlin, a good question actually, because about the two frameworks, Flutter is cross-platform. So okay, electricity just went out. Sorry about that. I'll just turn off my camera for a bit. But Flutter or Kotlin, talking about this, Kotlin is like native Android development. Although there is Kotlin multi-platform available, and I haven't checked that out. But if you're talking about like should you go with Android natively or should you take up a cross-platform framework, I would recommend native, as in if you're trying to build only Android applications, Kotlin would work the best. Like it's the official programming language for Android, and you would obviously have faster applications. And generally speaking, like you would go ahead with Kotlin, build Android application. You can build a good portfolio in that. But with Flutter, the advantage here is like your application would not only run on Android, it would also run well on iOS. And you can have like the same application running on two different devices, which is quite the advantage there. Uh, the speed somewhat is similar. Like if you'll see people comparing the two, you can watch a video. There's a video on the startup speeds of the two application. Kotlin application runs a bit faster, but the cross-platform application also somewhat takes over to that. Like it, there is a very minute difference, and on the users, and it might not be even noticeable. Uh, and I think that is all I would say. Like it depends on your use case. Should you be going ahead with only Android application, or should you build like cross-platform applications? So hey Ashish, thank you so much for having me here today. And VS Code is okay for Flutter. Yeah, definitely works. Like VS Code works fine. A lot of people use it. There are a lot of extensions that you can add to it to build applications the way you want. Java equal to that. I wouldn't say like it's completely similar. There are some like syntax differences that are there, but generally a lot of things are similar. So I know a lot like about Java for some time, so it was very easy for me to transition to that. Can we start with Flutter if we are not familiar with Dart language? Generally speaking, if you haven't learned, like if you don't have to exclusively go and learn Dart, like all the Flutter courses would cover Dart concepts that you need to know. And there are not a lot of things that you need to know, like unless you're trying to optimize your application. So as a beginner, if you take up a Flutter course, it would have all the essential concepts of Dart. Or if you just try to build applications by following the documentation, then I would recommend just doing that tour of Dart language, because it would cover all the concepts of Dart programming language, and you can then go ahead and build applications. So let me just go back to sharing my screen again, where we see the sample that we have built. uh, So when you run a Flutter project, this was the code that we had. This is some of the default code that is written, and as I had previously mentioned, like we had the Android, iOS directories, we had the web and Windows directory, but more importantly, all the code that we write goes inside this lib folder. So you can create a new file with an extension .dart. So everything that you will do would be with this extension .dart. So you will write code in the Dart programming language. Therefore, this file should have .dart extension. Again, this is like the default code that Flutter team has written, and when you run this project, you should see something like this. So this is right now running as a Windows application, which means I can create a executable file for this and send it over and have people install it. I can run the same application on web. It should like look the similar. It should be like a web application. It would work fine. If I'll run it on Android device, it would again look similar, and it would be like somewhat like this, because that is a mobile phone, so it would be fit to width on that, and it would have the app bar, some text in the middle, and a button like this. So when you click on this button, it should increment the counter on screen, and it would say like you have pushed this button this many times. The counter you can see. There is a app bar. This is something we call app bar in mobile language, or generally speaking, like this is on top. So this is the app bar, and we have some text inside it. So now coming back to code, we'll just try to identify some of these elements on screen. What happens is, like with any programming language, we have a main function. So they have created this main function, void main, and they are telling it to run application. So this run app function, this is a function as such. It takes in something called a widget. So my app here is a stateless widget. There are two types of widgets in Flutter. One is the stateless widget and one is the stateful widget. So by the name itself, like a stateless widget lacks something called state. You can think of state as data. Very simply put, state could be thought of as data. So let us say your application is connected to the internet. You are able to access some data, so your app is in a connected state. Similarly, if it's not connected to the internet, it is like not in that particular connection state, and it can't access that data. And more importantly, like uh, this state, like the UI or the user interface is a function of this state. So let us say your app is connected to the internet, so therefore the UI can show certain things, like it can show, maybe if you're on Instagram, it can show those reels on screen. But if it's not connected, then that particular UI, user interface, should show something else, maybe like a message that says, hey, like internet is not connected, or you're not connected to the internet, can't access that. And or it should show something like a loading progress indicator or something like that. So there are two types of widgets. One is the stateless widgets. They generally don't change during the application. So if you define a stateless widget once, you can think of that as a Lego block that doesn't change anything. But there are also stateful widgets that you can modify, as in you could have a stateful widget, and let us say it's sort of like a block. You want to change the color, so you can update that during the cycle of the application. So your application is running, you can change the color to make it from red to blue or do something like that, but you can't do that on a stateless widget. For a stateless widget, you have to destroy it and then rebuild or build a new one to change certain properties about it. So that is like the basic difference, and it becomes clearer as you work on more applications. But generally speaking, whenever you're creating a new widget, always create a stateless widget. So here we have a simple stateless widget. What it does is it takes in something called title. So in Flutter, when you're defining some property, you type in property name and then the corresponding value in front of it. So let us say I want to define a title. I would type in title colon and then type in like the property name, like let us say Flutter demo in this case. So this is like the journal way of how you would do things. And uh, this is like the basic code that they have written. I wouldn't go much in the depth of it, but once we come down here, what we can do is like I can get rid of a widget that they have here. Like this is a homepage widget. You would see like this one is a stateless widget. The upper one was a stateless widget, the upper one was a stateless widget, and I can just get rid of this from down here. And in my case, I would call it home page for now. uh, Once I do that, I'll also have to replace this widget here, because right now we deleted the last one and instead we have defined a new one. So I'm doing this only for demonstration right now. Like this is not meant to be a course, but this is just to give you a brief overview of how things work. So these widgets were again like sort of simple blocks that you can create, and in Flutter we have access to like some default widgets already available. How do I know this? Is I can go back to the documentation itself. I can go down to docs, and here you'll find something called a widgets catalog. So it tells you like all the rich set of Flutter widgets that are available in the SDK. You'll see like it's quite detailed. Let us say you want to create a hello world application. You would want to add some text on screen, so it tells you like you can see, come to this website and check out like what widget you want to use. you can go down to text, it will show you like all these different options that are available to you. Text is the simplest widget that we can use to create a hello world application, and this would show you how it's implemented. So this is like the text widget. uh, Now to use it inside our Flutter application, we come down to like our home page. We have created a new stateless widget, and it should take in something called a body, because we are trying to define that text. Okay, so you would notice like I have created a homepage widget which I have replaced here, so that my this is the widget that shows up inside my Flutter application. And then I have created a body for this particular widget which would take in a text, and this should be hello world. uh, I'll type in hello world, and I'll what I'll do is I'll just minimize this a bit and bring my application which was running right here. So now this was from the previous code that we had, but let us try saving this file. You'll see like something called performing hot reload coming here, and it should take some time. And once it is done, you would see like the code changes that we made right here are now visible here. So this is very small, and I don't know how visible it is to you on the stream, but it says hello world, and this is something. This is the text that we had added right here. So this is also one of the features of Flutter productivity, which is like you can change it to something and you can quickly see the changes on screen. But this should take some time, and you can like type in a new text and you can see like my name appear here. And that is what you can do with Flutter, right? So as soon as you write some code, you can save a file. It would do something called a hot reload, and you would see the changes on screen right here. So there are a few widgets that you mostly would use throughout your you know journey with Flutter. One journal one is a Scaffold widget. This is like a placeholder widget that just gives you access to certain properties. So as I have previously mentioned, let us say you're trying to modify a property. Let us say you want to add like a app bar that you previously had. You can type in the property name app bar, then you have to type in the corresponding value for it. So you can type in app bar, and once I save this, you'll see that this Aditya Thakur comes down, and you see like an empty app bar appear on top of the screen. You type in the property name, you type in the corresponding value, and that way you can just go on writing code in your Flutter application. Now again, this is like a question for you. If you want to add a title to this app bar, how would you do that? So you know the property that you want to modify, it is the title property. Then you have to give it a value. In our case, again we want to add some text, so we'll use the text widget and we'll give it a value. So new application, let us say. If I save this file, you'll see like new application appear inside the app bar. So that is how simple it is. And my goal with this session is only to show you like it's very simple getting started with Flutter. When I started with Flutter a few years back, it was relatively newer and there weren't a lot of people are working with it. But right now you have access to all these resources. You can learn Flutter from any like free YouTube course and just start building your application. And it's very simple. If you're creating a title, you can type in the property name, type in the corresponding value. In my case, since it was text, I was using a text widget. Let us say you want to add somewhere an image in your Flutter application. There is a widget for that, so you can just use that image widget. There are widgets that let you do a lot of other things. You can go to the documentation, check out the different widgets. There are widgets that let you align certain elements on screen. There are widgets that let you add animation and other such thing. uh, like there is this assets, images, icons. There are widgets for that, like icon, maybe an image, and all that stuff. So yep, now let's quickly come back to the presentation itself. I'll close this for now. What I'll do is I'll also do this. And okay, Okay, so we've talked about this. Like we've seen the Flutter project. We've seen like how simple it is building application on adding certain elements to your Flutter application. They're all widgets at the end of the day. But let's also talk about some of the projects that you can do when you're starting out with Flutter, and we'll also talk about some of these resources available on Flutter. So talking about the projects first, when you're starting out with Flutter, I would recommend building some UI clones. Why? Because Flutter is a UI framework. Building some of these would help you like know about some new widgets in Flutter, or maybe just know about like certain things that wouldn't come your way otherwise. Like you would know how to make your apps responsive. So a Flutter application would build for web. So web is a bit, it would cover the whole screen on if you're working on a laptop. uh, it would be different when it's on mobile, and for mobile apps too, like you might want to fit them on different screen sizes. Like the Android devices differ a lot when it comes to their screen sizes, so you would learn about how to place your widgets and how to work with certain elements on screen. Therefore I recommend building UI clones, but you can always go into building some more advanced application with like a music player that works with local files on devices. Maybe take up audio integration in that. Then you can check out working with APIs. You can try building a news application or a weather application. Take up a free API from like any website. Try to integrate inside your Flutter application. You will learn about HTTP requests. How do you make these requests? How to get data and show it inside your Flutter application. You can then move on to databases. There are a lot of options available, like with databases particularly, like you can use Firebase. They have a very detailed guide with Flutter. You can go over to Flutter Fire and they would have like everything on that, but you can also use some open source alternatives like there's Supabase, AppWrite, maybe a custom backend or a SQLite. uh, with databases particularly, I would recommend taking up authentication, how you can create, read, update, delete, and storage, and other such features like remote config analytics, which are available with Firebase. Uh, One of the most controversial or I would say like important topics when working with Flutter is state management, because I told you about state. It's generally about the user interface that you want to show to your user is a function of this state. So you want to manage it properly. So there are a few libraries or packages available that would help you. There's Provider, Riverpod, Block, and so many more that would help you. So you can look into that. For this particularly, you can build a e-commerce application to teach you about state management, payment integration, and lastly, you can also build a game. So that would teach you about animations in Flutter, physics, and motion. So these are all the different concepts that you would learn while building some of these projects. And the best way to learn Flutter is again by getting your hands dirty. Like once you start with Flutter, installation is the first step, because a lot of people that I know get stuck on installation. I would recommend watching videos and YouTube tutorials on how you can install Flutter. Once you're done with that, you can just go ahead and experiment. Like you can build a project over the weekend, and you can follow a tutorial maybe to build a project, but you can also follow a course and they would take you through. Like Flutter is very simple framework to get started on. You can start building your application, and the joy you would have, right? Because with development, or with mobile development particularly, the end product is very clear whenever you are starting out, right? So when you start with mobile development, by the end of it you'll have like a complete APK that you can just share it to your friends and you can send them. And it is always like a proud moment when they try out or test out your application. And possibly in future, if you are comfortable, you can publish it to app stores, play stores, and like reach a wide audience there. So with that said, like you can always do internships. Flutter is a growing framework. A lot of startups that are working are hiring Flutter developers. Why? Because again, uh, it means less development cost, because they don't have to hire 2 3 teams. They can hire a few people who work with Flutter to build their applications. And there are a lot of other things that you can work as. Like you can work as a freelancer. You can offer consultancy in Flutter because it's a relatively newer framework. And you can do a lot of things. Like you can also start your YouTube channel with Flutter development tutorials. But Before I go to that, I wanted to talk about again, I wanted to talk about resources, right? So with Flutter, like you can go over to YouTube and you would see a lot of free courses right now. Let's not do that. Let's search for YouTube. Uh, Flutter. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the courses that I generally recommend. There is a free course by Vandad. He's a Google developer expert, and you can go over to YouTube Vandad and search for this. You would have like a whole playlist, and it's quite detailed when it comes to Flutter. Uh, this is like a free Flutter course, and it's I think 35 hours of lesson, and it covers a lot of concepts. Like it covers introduction, the different advanced Dart concepts, the logout and unit testing, event testing, and creating your ideas, and a lot of things. And you can see like I have watched two of these videos because they were really good. Uh, Generally, I would recommend this course. You can like find more about him here. I also have a free course if you want to take that up. You can always go to my channel for that. There is Okay, so okay. So this is my playlist. This is a Flutter free Flutter course. I'm still like uploading some part of it. But this is also somewhat detailed, and you can check out my channel for that. It covers some of the Dart concepts and Flutter development. But generally speaking, the Flutter community is a lot vast. So if you'll search for any like on um any particular website, like let us say LinkedIn, Twitter, if you search for Flutter developers, you can find people who are very active. You can always look up Google developer experts because they have like they are also quite active in community. Vandal is quite he's a Google developer expert. He has all these tutorials. And once, even beyond this, like if you become a Flutter developer, you can always follow their courses. There is also Andrea. You can check out his courses. He's working on one recently, Code with Andrea. So this is the one, uh, Code with Andrea, and he also has a few courses on Flutter. Um, you can get them maybe through his website or maybe on Udemy even. They have like Flutter and Firebase build a complete course. So also you can always like go over to teamaditya.co. This is our this is like my community website, and you can get this free Flutter resource book. So this resource book has some of the channels. It's like for free, so you can type in zero here and you can find like resources. Both are like YouTube channels, blogs, and mediums and publications, to just learn about Flutter. And you can always join us on Discord to ask any questions if you have as a Flutter developer. So that is it. Like this is the final reminder. If you have any questions, I'm here for any conversation. And thank you so much for joining me today on this session on getting started with Flutter. Uh, you can always like reach out to me on like LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you are comfortable, and ask any questions even beyond this session if you have any. You can ask, like I can help you with opportunities if you want that. Like if you go ahead and learn Flutter, if you're looking for internship, I'm always there to help. Because when I was starting out, I feel a lot of people weren't hiring back then, but right now a lot of companies in Flutter are hiring. So if you ever need help with that, you can always reach out. And yeah, I'll come back to the questions right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess there is no questions here.
Is Windows 11 fine with Flutter? Or there were a few issues with that. So right now the system that I'm running on, it's also Windows 11, right? So I don't think like I haven't had that much problem. Although I have moved like ever since I upgraded to Windows 11, I haven't quite used Flutter, but the time I used it, it worked fine. So I don't think as such I have any, but I looked that up. Maybe there could be some reported issues that I'll have to look up.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really wonderful session by Aditya.
Yep.
Yeah, and folks, if you have any doubts related to Flutter, you can just drop your questions out there in the chat, or you can also reach out to Aditya in his LinkedIn and with Twitter, and we have shared the links. You can get connected as well. So yeah, and one more
Thank
thing I would like to add, like Aditya also has one YouTube channel of over like I guess of 5 to 6K subscribers. So just make sure you are also subscribing his channel because because he's doing such a great work for the community. So it's our responsibility to give some back to him. So yeah, so for now, if you have any doubts, you can ask it. Otherwise, like we are going to end this.
Thanks so much for sharing these links. Um,
Yeah, it's okay. So yeah, I think there is no doubts. So maybe we can like now end this session. Okay, so
sure.
thank you everyone.
Thanks.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
And all the
Aditya.
best with your hacks. Would really love to see some of them built with Flutter. And thank you for
Yeah,
having me again in the session on Flutter.
yeah. Till then, learn, implement, and yeah, make sure to participate in our holidays. And yeah, thank you everyone. We will see you like in our next session. Wait, is there one question?
Yeah. Yeah. I tried Flutter, but not getting how to work with database and also transferring data between two views. Any resource you can suggest? So with databases particularly, if you're like working with Firebase, I would say there's the Flutter Fire official website, which I personally use. Although it could be somewhat difficult for like new developers, but if that is the case, like I don't think like there are any new uh, courses that I have seen in a while on Flutter and Firebase, but is the firebase.flutter.dev that I would know. Like you can maybe take this up on like on our server. Just like send me the GitHub link. I can help you with that. But generally speaking, like if you're not able to do this, like it could be some just say if you make basic requests, so you have to look up वहाँ से like you collections and documents, and then we have to make some changes to that. But I think this would be a more detailed question, as in like you have to see some things of your code, and then maybe I can pitch it better. But if you're looking for maybe if you're working with not Firebase and some other custom backends, I would recommend checking out like Abhishek's channel. He's also a creator and he does a lot of video on that. Uh, yep, that would be it.
Yeah. So yeah, Gopication. I hope you got your answer. And yeah, so thank you everyone. So yeah, thank you for joining us. So I'm ending. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you.